Hello, it's Dr. Owen. Welcome back to part two of a three-part video series that I've put together on Brexit, my personal perspective about Brexit, where we're going, not so much where we've been, because I feel right now that's irrelevant. And if you haven't had a chance to, please do look at part one of the series of videos that I've done. Certainly at the time that I'm recording this, I think we'd had over 4,000 hits on YouTube, so it's great to see so much interest in this, and it is geared primarily towards property investors. For those of you just starting on your journey towards property, or maybe for those of you more experienced, just looking ahead and what things you might want to consider, what plans you might want to make. And again, this is just my beliefs and my views. This is certainly not meant to be financial advice, but do take it from a perspective of me seeing this as a property investor. And this part two is really addressing house prices. Part three will be addressing the rental market and looking at how you can position yourself for that. I want to just jump in and be provocative and ask and challenge really everybody to think about where they're going with their property portfolio and consider what the market's doing. So let's jump in very quickly. Now, from my perspective, there's really three elements that you need to consider as a result of Brexit with regards to property investing. And literally, it's as simple as that. If you want to complicate the picture, you can, but I've broken this down into house prices. In other words, if you're buying, holding and selling, or buying to sell for a profit, what's the impact on the house prices, both short and long term? How do you deal with that? The second thing is the rental demand. So for those of you holding or looking to buy properties to rent, how could Brexit potentially affect you both now and in the future? And we'll come back to that on a separate video. And the last one is obviously the interest rates and where we're going with that in terms of the overall interest rates. Now, I haven't done a separate video on that. It's a lot more simplified, I think, in terms of interest rates. Right now, in fact, as I've recorded this, we've actually had a drop in interest rates. And my general view on this is that when there is nervousness in the market, when there's uncertainty after an event, Brexit being a significant event in terms of the United Kingdom, then normally, because of that, the government have to take a serious look at things. The Monetary Policy Committee have taken a view, obviously, the way the economy is going, the nervousness, and often with that comes adjustments to things like interest rates. And actually, we've seen that. Certainly, that must have had some influence on the final decision, and we've seen a reduction in interest rates down to 0.25 at the moment. Obviously, that's going to change, and ultimately, it will go back up again. So, in a way, I talked about this some 2 or 3 months ago, even prior to Brexit, saying if we do end up leaving, I think we're going to see a drop in interest rates, and actually that's happened. Okay, so let's take a look at house prices. That's where I want to go with you next. So in this slide, all I'm doing here is I'm going to give you three things to consider. With regards to house prices as a result of Brexit, I think you have to review, if you're a London-based investor, there is London and then there's the rest of the UK, or there's London and there's the southern counties and then there's the rest of the UK. So we're going up into South Midlands, and then above there, right up into the Lancashire, Yorkshire, right up into the sort of northeast, northwest, and obviously across into Wales, places like that. And what I believe, from everything I've read and some of the quite significant reports that have been produced, actually, both prior to Brexit and then coming through Brexit, is that essentially what we've got a situation here is that when you consider London had a huge number of international investors. In fact, I took a quick look at this, and on the right-hand side, you've got to consider it like this. When you're looking at house price, you've got to consider, are you looking to hold a property for long term, or are you looking to buy it and renovate and sell it, or buy it and sell it out to the market? If you're looking at selling, then you've got to consider domestic buyers or international buyers. That's it. So you've either got UK-based buyers who will buy your properties, or you're going to have international people that will buy your properties. And both of those two demographics will react differently to Brexit. Then you've got to take a short-term and a long-term view. And the short-term view is for those of you that might be buying and looking to renovate and sell to generate a profit on your properties. In other words, what we call flipping properties for profit. And then you've got the longer-term view, which is you're holding properties probably to rent them and then ultimately to sell them out. And this is why I talk about turning points, because I honestly believe that turning points are so important. Those of you that don't know much about my background, I wrote a book called Turning Point in 2011. We traditionally ran turning point seminars, helping people go through financial turning points, through health turning points, mindset turning points, etc., and economic turning points that occur to us and within our own personal lives. This is a massive economic turning point, Brexit. That's what it really is, if you look at it. So let's come back to this for a minute. Let's talk about London just for a second. These are statistics from Knight Frank, and you can see here that 16% of buyers within London, 16.5%, nearly 17%, were people from within Europe. So has Brexit had an impact on potentially people looking to buy here? Absolutely. If they're nervous about their position in the next couple of years, once we go through Article 50, which is the formal process to getting out, where do they stand? What situation occurs for them if they're owning properties in the UK, etc. So certainly that large chunk, is not quite 20%, but not quite a fifth, but it's certainly a large chunk of the buyers in London that are international, are European. Then there will be an effect on there, maybe being cautious, possibly looking to sell some properties. You've got 7.5% there, Middle Eastern. 9% actually is Russian, which is really interesting, and we know that because over the last few years, I'd say half a decade or more even, a lot of big investors coming in from places like Russia and buying huge amounts of property at the high-end market typically. Indian investors and North Americans constitute 4.5% each, so that's nearly 8-9% between the two of them. If you add into that then other areas such as Africa, which is another 4.5%, you can see it's quite a chunk of different nations buying in. In fact, I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, I think in 1 or 2 or 3 postcodes within central London, Indians had invested something like £1 billion worth of purchases in the London area in the space of 1 year. So has Brexit affected their thinking? I'm sure it has. Has it made them nervous? Without a doubt, maybe even thinking about exiting their deals. What's really interesting, however, is because the pound devalued as a result of Brexit, i.e. it dropped by whatever it was, 15 to 20% against the other currencies, or certainly a lot of the major currencies, certainly against European currencies. If you look at euro, I should say, versus the pound, we saw a shift of average house price in London, and don't quote me exactly on this, but ballpark figures, dropping by something like 50 or 60,000 pounds in terms of a European buyer looking at it, because of the fact the pound was obviously devalued against the euro. So somebody sat in Europe looking at London went, oh my gosh, suddenly I've seen a discount on the property price of 50 or 60,000 pounds, which is great. And we did see, certainly for a short period, an influx of people taking advantage of that. Now the dust is settling even as I'm recording this now, so I can't guarantee exactly where we're at, but certainly you'll notice that there's been an adjustment. So there was a bit of a buying spree initially, and as the dust has settled now, you're moving into this cautious period that I talked about in the first video. And the cautious period is this slight drop in prices in certain areas. Domestic buyers, a little bit unsure what to do. Do I wait? Are the prices going to go down? Shall I wait and see if I can get it for a cheaper price? What if prices don't go up? Should I just stay where I am at the moment? There's all these thinking going on. So in central London and certainly outer London, those sorts of areas, there's definitely been a knee-jerk reaction. If you look around the rest of the country, however, my personal view, there hasn't been a massive knock-on effect. And in fact, the general rule appears to be, and if you read around and look into this yourself, that those people that tended to want to exit, to Brexit, whatever you want to call it, and those that wanted to stay, the markets where people wanted to stay, the high-end, the high net worth, the people that maybe had some investment in Europe, etc., those areas appear to have been affected more. And in fact, the studies suggest that there's over the next few years, it's going to be a bigger impact in the central areas, London, the south, than in the rest of the United Kingdom. So if you go into Lancashire, northeast, northwest, into Yorkshire, for example, even to the Midlands towards Wales, that won't have had such a big effect. These are different markets altogether, lower income earners, different spread demographically, etc. And however, there will be people there that are renting from the European market. Polish people, Czech Republic people, many of them I've got in our properties already. I want to cover that in the next video on this particular series, but we're talking about house price at the moment. Okay, so you've got to be thinking short term and long term. Now, if you are thinking short term, one of the things you've got to consider is if you're buying a property and renovating it and there's this uncertainty, this nervousness, you may not expect to get the price that you want to get to the property in 3, 4, 5, 6 months time, because we're still in that nervous period. Remember, I'm only recording this within a month or two of Brexit. If you're listening to this in 2017, 2018, some of this might then be out of date because we'll have moved beyond that. But for those of you that are buying, renovating at the moment and have got an extremely optimistic view, just be cautious. That's all I want to say. And I already know people that have been doing refinancing in the last 2 or 3 months in certain areas and not getting the back end refinancing figures they were hoping for. And the feeling is it's partly because the banks are being more cautious, the valuers are being more cautious, and there's just a general nervousness in certain areas. So you need to check this out if you're looking for a short buy, renovate and sell type project. Long term, my view is properties will continue to grow and prices will continue to grow. That's just my own personal view. And one of the reasons for that is because we've got a swelling population. You're talking about an increase in the population of somewhere between 3 to 400,000. In some statistics, I've seen up to 500,000, but that does include, with the migration figures, the net migration figures, which is the number of people coming in from overseas, particularly Europe, versus those going back. And that left a net figure of some 180 to 200,000 people plus, and that influenced our population growth in this country. So we are going to see an adjustment in the population growth. What the statistics are suggesting, and again I'm just quoting you from memory at the moment, but in order for us to slow up our growth of our population, our net migration figure would have to drop to something like, 50, 60,000 to slow it up. And that is highly unlikely because of the number of people that are still coming in versus those that are leaving. There's still significant numbers right now. The last year's deficit, I think, or the difference, the surplus was about 230, 240,000. So you've got to take all this into consideration. Now, that added to which, we've got a growing population of new births. If you look at the population bell, we've got the baby boomers coming towards the end of their life, then their children, who I think are called the eco-boomers, and then their children. So there's these bell curves in the population curve of natural people being born in this country. And if you see, they're all progressing through. One of the biggest curves is sort of the 35 to 45 age group. And they're desperately in need of houses. In fact, I think the first time buyers age is about 38 years of age in this country. So we've got a big bell in the middle, and they need homes. So whatever anyone argues against this and says, well, they're going to end up renting. Agreed, they will end up renting, but they still ultimately want to buy. And that's where we have other clever strategies like the options to buy. We can give people the right to buy from us, maybe not in 2 years, but in 5 years' time, etc. So in a long-term view, we can be thinking about holding our properties, renting them, letting the market settle and then the prices go up, even putting tenant buyers in there who have the right to buy from us in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years' time at an agreed price. And this introduces all the clever strategies. These are the sort of things I'm going to be reviewing with my own. I have a small group of private clients that I work with, and we haven't had a chance to sit down yet since Brexit. But when I do, I'll be looking at these strategies for them and saying, right, what's your short and medium and long-term strategies? Because we need to take into account all these factors. So let me try and summarize with my last slide. So what are the key summary points to this short presentation to you? And it's part 2, remember, of 3 parts. So the third part will be on rental. Okay, so in summary, what am I saying? If you're looking to refinance a property, then the key thing here is buy the property and add value where possible. I do meet a lot of people that buy properties from a distressed seller, and there will be people out there that will want to sell in this market because they're nervous and maybe they don't have a longer term view on it, and they just think, oh my gosh, house prices might drop again. I've read this propaganda. Well, they won't know it's propaganda, but they've read this stuff in the news and they're panicking and they go, oh shit, and they just want to sell. So you buy your property discounted, you come along 6 months later and you might decide to refinance that property, having done very little work on it, if none at all, but you bought it below market value, and the valuer goes, you know what, I can't see you've added value, so I'm not going to add value to this property. I'm not going to increase the price that you want it to go up to. Plus there's the cautiousness, the nervousness in the market will add to that factor as well, as we've seen in some areas. So the key thing here is, if you're buying a property and renovating it and then refinancing it, make sure you have clearly added value. Keep proof of that. Have a schedule of works. Have your builder present that to you so you can present that to the valuer. So you've got a strong case to put to the bank, because otherwise what may happen is you go back 6, 8 months later and you don't see the uplift that you're expecting because you haven't put a strong case forward to the bank, to the valuer. Very important. So don't be over optimistic. I guess that's my message here. And that comes to part 2 here, because one of the strategies in buying and renovating a property and then maybe looking to hold it is in the refinancing process. We're looking to extract our money back out of the property. In a best case scenario, we might put all of our money back out in 6 months' time. But in most cases, you're going to potentially leave some in there, and then it comes out with the cash flow from the property, and you might get it back in a year to 2 years or so, something like that. So I'm going to say to you, be conservative. I meet people go, yeah, I'm going to absolutely get this back in value for the property. I'm going to put all my money back out, etc. I have a more conservative view on that. I'm going to approach the market at the moment with the cautiousness of somebody saying, well, look, there has been a nervous reaction. Valuers are being more cautious. The banks are being more cautious. So rather than me be over optimistic with my back end value, let me have a realistic back end value. Having bought it for say 150, added 30 to it, so I'm in for 180, and maybe originally I was expecting 250. I might say, okay, I'm going to assume 220, 230 to be a bit more conservative, and run your numbers based on two scenarios, best case and or three scenarios, best case, worst case, and medium case. And are you comfortable with that should it not value quite where you want it to because of the nervousness of Brexit? That's the second one. Third thing is flips. Buying, renovating and selling a property, check the liquidity. The liquidity is how fast the properties sell in an area. I believe that we've already started to see this in some areas as a result of Brexit. Some markets have slowed down. There's a cautiousness. Some buyers aren't prepared to buy yet. They're waiting to see. They're looking for the dust to settle. They're going to give it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever. And so you're going out there really optimistic, thinking I can flip this property quickly. And guess what happens? It sits on the market and then you get frustrated. And if you haven't got a second exit strategy to rent, whatever, you're going to be in trouble. So just be aware of that. So if you're flipping properties, make sure you've checked the markets moving quickly and you've checked with the valuations at the back end, i.e. you've spoken to valuers, you've spoken to estate agents. Will the property sell? Has Brexit affected the market? And if it has, think about a secondary backup strategy. And the last point here is positioning. Take a long-term view. So, outside of buying, renovating and selling, if your properties are being held for renting, then don't be too panicky on this one. Just take a calm breath. Remember, equity does not pay the bills. Cash flow pays the bills. So if you're concerned about values, just think about you're holding these properties under 10, 15, 20 years or more. You've got mortgage on them for 20 to 30 years. And so we know the value of those properties is going to go up over the long term. It's just right now, it's a little bit of a speed bump in the road. And that's all I'm going to say on it for now. 4 suggestions just to wrap up. I'm going to do one last slide here. And that's to say, if you've got any questions, you want to throw anything at us or contact us, come to the website www.drrowe.tv. Go there and go to the contacts page, drop an email on with a question or whatever, and it will come through to us, obviously. We have had some inquiries, even from my previous one, asking about the turning points and some of the things that we do. Don't run it very often. There is one coming up next year, that's 2017, as I'm recording this. You'll need to find out that by going to bookturningpoint.com. And it'd be lovely to meet you and maybe talk about some of the things that you've been learning and doing and just helping you evolve as a person and creating your own turning points as well. Look out for part 3, and it is the last and final part. It's really Brexit and the rental market and how to position yourself for that. Thanks a lot. Take care.